Ma'am, I need to see that ID.
I'm helping a patient right now, officer. This will take just a moment.
No. Your ID. Now.
I'm in compliance. Let me finish the transaction and you'll have it.
Stop stalling. Your ID. Now.
All right.
This account reconstructs a pharmacy confrontation based on patterns documented in cases where anonymous tips have been used as pretext for discriminatory enforcement. Names and specific details have been altered to protect privacy. On March 17, 2023, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Officer Daniel Reeves of the Westlake Police Department entered Morgan Community Pharmacy on 4328 Oakwood Drive in Westlake, Texas. He claimed to be responding to an anonymous tip about theft, a claim that would later collapse under scrutiny. What began as what he described as a routine follow-up would ultimately cost him his 12-year career, his pension, his reputation, and nearly $16 million in damages. Have you ever wondered what happens when law enforcement uses anonymous tips as cover for discriminatory targeting? If you want to see how justice finally catches up to those who abuse their authority, subscribe now to follow this investigation. Officer Reeves had a concerning history that should have raised red flags long before this incident. Department records would later reveal he had been the subject of 7 civilian complaints over the past 3 years, 5 specifically involving allegations of racial profiling during identification checks at minority-owned businesses. None resulted in disciplinary action. His personnel file contained 2 supervisor notes expressing concerns about judgment in community interactions, yet he remained on patrol duty without additional training or oversight. The pharmacy's security system captured the entire interaction from multiple angles. The main counter camera clearly shows Officer Reeves bypassing 2 white pharmacy technicians to directly confront Dr. Morgan, the only black staff member present. The front door camera records him entering without speaking to the security guard or front desk staff, making a direct line to the prescription counter. The side-angle camera captures his body language, the slight smirk, the casual hand placement on his belt near his weapon, the way he leans forward into Dr. Morgan's space. Details that would become crucial evidence in the subsequent lawsuit. What Officer Reeves couldn't have known was that Dr. Alana Morgan wasn't just any pharmacist. Before opening her independent pharmacy, she had served as the chief pharmaceutical officer for the Texas State Hospital System. She held a doctorate in pharmacy from the University of Texas, had served on the State Board of Pharmacy Ethics Committee, and had previously worked as a consultant for the very department Reeves represented on proper protocol for pharmacy investigations. When he walked in and immediately demanded my identification without even asking to speak to the owner or manager first, I knew exactly what was happening. Dr. Morgan would later testify. This wasn't my first experience with this type of targeted enforcement, but it would be my last time staying silent about it. The security footage shows Dr. Morgan maintaining remarkable composure as Officer Reeves escalates the situation. When she requests to finish assisting an elderly patient with critical heart medication instructions, the officer positions himself to the side, sighing audibly and checking his watch repeatedly, making it clear he finds the delay unnecessary. I need to see your pharmacist license, DEA registration, and business permit now, he says with a thin smile. Anonymous tips about theft in pharmacies are taken very seriously. The body camera footage from Officer Reeves would later reveal a critical detail. Earlier that same day, he had responded to 2 other anonymous tips at businesses in the same district, both owned by black professionals. In those locations, he had used nearly identical language about reports of suspicious activity that required immediate identification checks. No actual theft reports were ever found in the dispatch logs for any of these locations. As the confrontation continues, Dr. Morgan carefully complies while documenting the interaction. She retrieves her credentials from a nearby filing cabinet while activating the pharmacy's secondary recording system, a precaution she had installed after hearing about similar incidents from other minority business owners in the area. Officer, I'm providing everything you've requested, but I'd like to know the nature of this alleged theft. As the owner, I have a right to know what's been reported about my business, she says calmly. I don't need to provide that information, Reeves responds. The tip was anonymous, and I'm just following up. An anonymous tip requires corroboration to establish reasonable suspicion, Dr. Morgan replies. What corroborating evidence do you have that justified this intervention? The security footage captures Officer Reeves' momentary hesitation, A pharmacist quoting legal standards was clearly not what he expected. "Ma'am, I don't need to explain police procedure to you," he finally says. "Just cooperate with the investigation. What happens next will shock you." The officer's actions in the following minutes would not only end his career, but would trigger a federal investigation into departmental practices that had gone unchecked for years. Have you ever experienced or witnessed law enforcement using vague tips or reports as justification for selective scrutiny? What do you think proper protocol should be for following up on anonymous tips? Share your thoughts in the comments while we prepare to reveal how this routine Tuesday afternoon became a $15.9 million landmark case that changed police procedure across the state of Texas. As Officer Reeves examines Dr. Morgan's credentials, his demeanor shifts subtly. The security footage captures him flipping through her documentation with unusual scrutiny, holding each page up to the light as if searching for forgeries. According to pharmacy technician Melissa Winter's later deposition, he kept looking at her license, then back at Dr. Morgan, like he couldn't believe they matched. These seem to be in order, Officer Reeves finally admits, though his tone suggests disappointment. "Now I need to see your controlled substances inventory log." Anonymous tips about pharmacy theft often involve missing narcotics. "Officer, I'd like to see the report of this alleged theft," Dr. Morgan responds firmly. "As a DEA registrant, I'm required to report any controlled substance discrepancies myself. No such report has been filed because no theft has occurred." "The tip came in anonymously through dispatch," Reeves replies. "I don't have a written report to show you." According to internal police department records obtained during discovery, no anonymous tip about Morgan Community Pharmacy was logged in the dispatch system on March 17, 2023. A search of all calls for the preceding week revealed no mentions of the pharmacy. This discrepancy would become central to the lawsuit. In my 27 years in law enforcement, I have never seen an officer respond to an alleged theft without obtaining basic information about what was supposedly stolen, testified former police chief Raymond Hernandez, an expert witness for the plaintiff. Standard procedure requires documenting what items are allegedly missing, when the theft supposedly occurred, and who might have had access. Officer Reeves sought none of this information, suggesting the anonymous tip was merely a pretext for the encounter. As Dr. Morgan continues to question the basis for the investigation, Officer Reeves grows increasingly defensive. The pharmacy's cameras show him stepping closer to Dr. Morgan, lowering his voice. "Listen, I'm just doing my job here. If everything's on the up and up, you have nothing to worry about. But I need to see those inventory logs now." "I understand you're doing your job, officer," Dr. Morgan responds. "And I'm doing mine by ensuring proper procedures are followed. I'll show you the logs, but I want it noted that I'm complying under protest, as I believe this request lacks proper foundation." While Dr. Morgan retrieves the log from her office, Officer Reeves makes a call to dispatch. The pharmacy's office recording system captures his side of the conversation. "Yeah, I'm still at that pharmacy on Oakwood. Run a full check on Alana Morgan. DOB September 14th, 75. Texas license. Texas plates. Yeah, I'll hold." This request for a background check during what was supposedly a theft investigation violated Department Policy 17.3, which states, "Officers shall not initiate background investigations without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity directly related to the subject." When he requested my personal background check, I knew this had nothing to do with any theft report, Dr. Morgan later testified. "This was a fishing expedition targeting me personally, not an investigation of a reported crime." While waiting for the background check results, Officer Reeves begins examining the pharmacy itself, walking behind the counter without permission. Another violation of protocol for pharmacy investigations, which require consent or a warrant to access dispensing areas. He was touching things, opening drawers, looking at patient information, stated pharmacy technician James Wilson in his witness statement. When I asked if he had authorization to be in the restricted area, he said, "I don't need permission to investigate a crime." But he never actually told us what crime he was investigating. The dispatcher calls back with the background check results. Nothing on a record. The dispatcher can be heard saying, through the phone. Again, Officer Reeves' expression registers visible surprise. What Officer Reeves couldn't have known was that Dr. Morgan had already begun documenting a pattern. After hearing from other minority business owners in the Westlake area about similar experiences with anonymous tip investigations, she had installed additional security cameras and established a legal defense fund with several other black professionals in the community. "We weren't just being paranoid," stated James Washington, owner of Washington Family Dental and founding member of the Westlake Minority Business Alliance, in his witness statement. "We compared notes and realized the same officers were conducting investigations at our businesses repeatedly, always based on vague tips or reports that never materialized into actual cases." The pharmacy's front counter camera captures an elderly customer approaching one of the technicians during the inspection. "Is Dr. Morgan in trouble?" the woman asks, concerned. "I've been coming here for 12 years. She's the best pharmacist in town." "No, ma'am," the technician responds. "Just another anonymous tip investigation. Third one this year." This exchange would later be cited in Dr. Morgan's lawsuit as evidence of the inspection's disruptive impact on her business and reputation. After nearly 45 minutes, far longer than standard procedure for following up on a theft report, Officer Reeves returns to the main pharmacy area with Dr. Morgan. The security footage shows him leaning close to her and speaking in a lowered voice. "Everything seems to be in order, technically speaking," he says, "but I'll be keeping an eye on this place. Sometimes these tips don't pan out immediately, but where there's smoke, there's usually fire." According to the lawsuit filing, this statement constituted an implicit threat of continued harassment without legitimate law enforcement purpose. What Officer Reeves didn't realize was that his body camera was still recording, capturing a conversation with his partner who was waiting in the patrol car outside. "How'd it go in there?" the partner asks. "Clean as a whistle, surprisingly," Reeves responds. "No evidence of any theft. Probably a bogus tip. Worth the time?" his partner questions. "Maybe. Gotta check out the owner anyway. You know how it is with these places. Sometimes they look legitimate on the surface, but you never know what's really going on." This exchange would become central evidence in the lawsuit, with the phrase "these places" analyzed extensively by expert witnesses on implicit bias in law enforcement. Dr. Morgan's response to the incident was methodical and strategic. Rather than filing an immediate complaint, she consulted with civil rights attorney Marcel Whitfield, who had successfully represented 3 other minority business owners in similar cases. What made Dr. Morgan's case exceptional wasn't just the incident itself, but the meticulous documentation she had gathered, Whitfield explained in a later interview. She had records of every interaction with law enforcement, comparative data from other pharmacies in the area, and statistical evidence showing a pattern of selective enforcement. The investigation revealed that while Morgan Community Pharmacy had been subjected to 7 anonymous tip investigations in the previous 2 years, the 3 other pharmacies within a 5-mile radius, all owned by white pharmacists, had received a combined total of 0 such visits during the same period. According to department records we obtained through discovery, Officer Reeves had responded to 23 anonymous tips about businesses in the previous year, stated Attorney Whitfield in court documents. 21 of those businesses were owned by minorities. Not a single one of these investigations resulted in criminal charges or evidence of actual wrongdoing. Perhaps most damning was the evidence uncovered through a public records request for text messages between Officer Reeves and Sergeant Thomas Wilkins, his direct supervisor. 3 hours before the incident at Morgan Pharmacy, Reeves texted, "Heading to check out that pharmacy on Oakwood. Owner doesn't look like what you'd expect." Wilkins responded, "Keep me posted. These surprise inspections keep everyone honest." This exchange directly contradicted Reeves' claim that he was responding to an anonymous tip, suggesting the visit was planned in advance as a surprise inspection, targeting Dr. Morgan specifically. What do you think happens when a respected professional with an impeccable record finally decides to fight back against systemic discrimination? How would you respond if you were repeatedly targeted while watching others receive preferential treatment? As we'll see in the next segment, Dr. Morgan's decision to pursue justice would uncover a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond a single officer or a single pharmacy, leading to one of the largest settlements in Texas history for discriminatory enforcement practices. 3 weeks after the incident at Morgan Community Pharmacy, Officer Daniel Reeves returned. This time, he claimed to be following up on the previous investigation. As captured on the pharmacy's security system, Officer Reeves entered with the same confident stride, bypassing customers and heading directly to the prescription counter where Dr. Morgan was working. "Good morning, Officer Reeves." Dr. Morgan greeted him by name, surprising him visibly. "Back so soon. Was there another anonymous tip?" "Just following up on our previous visit," he replied with a thin smile. "Need to see your credentials again and check a few more things." "Of course," Dr. Morgan responded calmly. "And I'll also need to see your badge number and departmental identification, please. My attorney has advised me to document all law enforcement interactions with my business." The security footage shows Officer Reeves freezing momentarily, his expression shifting from confidence to uncertainty. "Your attorney?" he questioned. "Yes. Marcel Whitfield of Whitfield, Johnson and Associates," Dr. Morgan stated clearly, making sure her voice was captured by the recording systems. "After your last visit, I consulted with legal counsel about the pattern of anonymous tips that seem to exclusively target my pharmacy and other minority-owned businesses in the area. According to court documents, this moment marked the first indication to Officer Reeves that his actions were being monitored and documented. What he couldn't have known was that Dr. Morgan wasn't just any pharmacist with a lawyer. She was about to become the catalyst for a case that would reshape law enforcement practices across Texas. "I don't think that's necessary," Officer Reeves responded, his demeanor noticeably cooler. "This is just routine." "I understand," Dr. Morgan replied. "And routine procedures should be documented routinely. Wouldn't you agree? Now, my credentials are ready for your inspection, and I've prepared copies of all the documentation you requested during your last visit to save time." As Dr. Morgan handed over a meticulously organized folder, a customer approached the counter. Dr. James Wilson, Chief of Surgery at Westlake Memorial Hospital and a longtime friend of Dr. Morgan. "Everything all right here, Alana?" Dr. Wilson asked, his hospital ID badge prominently displayed on his white coat. "Just a follow-up visit from Officer Reeves, James," Dr. Morgan responded. Apparently, he's still investigating that anonymous tip about theft, though nothing was ever found to be missing. This seemingly casual interaction would later be revealed as a carefully orchestrated moment. Dr. Wilson was not just any customer. He was a member of the Texas Medical Board and had been briefed by Attorney Whitfield about the ongoing documentation of selective enforcement. "In my 15 years serving on a medical board, I've never witnessed such targeted scrutiny of a healthcare provider without cause," Dr. Wilson would later testify. The statistical improbability of these repeated, anonymous tips targeting specifically minority-owned healthcare facilities raised immediate red flags from a regulatory perspective. Officer Reeves quickly reviewed the documents, his body language showing increasing discomfort as he realized several customers were watching the interaction with interest. "Everything appears to be in order," he stated curtly, returning the folder. "I'll be on my way." "Before you go, Officer," Dr. Morgan said, "I've prepared a formal request for information regarding the anonymous tips that led to your visits. My attorney will be filing this with your department today." She handed him an official-looking document. The security footage captures Officer Reeves' expression changing as he scanned the document. A Freedom of Information Act request for all records related to dispatch calls, anonymous tips, and officer assignments for pharmacy investigations in the district over the past 5 years. "You can give this to your supervisor," he said, attempting to hand it back. "Actually, as a representative of the department currently on site, you're authorized to accept service of this document," Dr. Morgan stated calmly. "It's already been logged, and a copy has been sent to your department headquarters as well." What Officer Reeves couldn't have known was that this interaction was the culmination of weeks of careful preparation. Following the first incident, Dr. Morgan had connected with 4 other minority business owners in the area who had experienced similar targeted enforcement. Together, they had compiled data showing a disturbing pattern. Analysis of public records revealed that businesses owned by minorities in Westlake were 11.3 times more likely to receive anonymous tip investigations than those owned by white proprietors, despite having better average compliance histories, stated Dr. Eliza Washington, statistician and expert witness, in her court affidavit. As Officer Reeves left the pharmacy, visibly unsettled, he made a critical mistake. He failed to turn off his body camera, which continued recording as he returned to his patrol car, and called his supervisor. "Sarge, we might have a situation at that pharmacy on Oakwood," he can be heard saying. "The owner's got some high-powered attorney, and she's filing information requests about our anonymous tip system." "What did you do, Reeves?" The sergeant responds, audibly concerned. Nothing. Just the usual follow-up. But she's got everything documented, dates of all her inspections. Some doctor from the medical board was there watching. I think she's building something. Jesus, Reeves. I told you to ease up on those places. Did you run her name like I told you to? Yeah. Came back clean. Did you check who she knows? Who her connections are? No, This is exactly what I was worried about. Get back to the station. Now. This recorded conversation would become the linchpin of the federal case, providing clear evidence of departmental awareness of potentially discriminatory practices. What Officer Reeves and his department didn't realize was that Dr. Alana Morgan wasn't just a successful pharmacist. She was also the daughter of retired federal judge Raymond Morgan, who had presided over several landmark civil rights cases in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. My father always taught me that documentation is the key to justice, Dr. Morgan would later explain in her first national television interview. He said, "The system works, but only if you make it work by bringing irrefutable evidence to light." 2 days after this second interaction, attorney Marcel Whitfield filed a federal lawsuit on behalf of Dr. Morgan and 4 other minority business owners in Westlake, alleging systematic discrimination in law enforcement practices. The lawsuit named Officer Reeves, the Westlake Police Department, the City of Westlake, and 3 supervising officers as defendants. The filing of this lawsuit triggered an automatic review of Officer Reeves' body camera footage from both incidents, standard procedure in federal civil rights cases. What investigators discovered transformed the case from a local dispute into a federal investigation. The body camera evidence revealed a disturbing pattern of Officer Reeves and several colleagues specifically targeting minority-owned businesses for enhanced scrutiny, with explicit discussions about using anonymous tips as cover for what they termed compliance checks and what they called unexpected success stories, stated FBI Special Agent Carla Rodriguez in her investigative summary. The most damning evidence came when federal investigators discovered that the department maintained an unofficial list of businesses for special attention, a list that included every minority-owned professional establishment in Westlake. The document, titled Community Monitoring Priorities, was stored on a private server rather than the department's official system. This document represents the smoking gun in this case, stated U.S. Attorney Rebecca Parker at a press conference announcing the federal investigation. It shows a systematic targeting of minority professionals under the guise of responding to anonymous tips that, in fact, never existed. Within 48 hours of the lawsuit filing, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division announced it was opening a pattern or practice investigation into the Westlake Police Department, elevating what had begun as one pharmacist's stand against harassment into a federal case with national implications. Officer Reeves was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, standard procedure that would normally cause little concern for an officer with his seniority. But as evidence continued to mount, his situation grew increasingly dire. The transformation from routine inspection to federal case happened with stunning speed. Local news outlets initially covered the story as a minor dispute, but when the DOJ announced its involvement, national media descended on Westlake. What began as one officer's apparent bias has exposed what appears to be a systemic issue of discriminatory enforcement targeting successful minority professionals, reported CNN's legal affairs correspondent. Sources close to the investigation indicate that text messages and emails recovered from department servers show the troubling pattern of targeting what officers refer to as unexpected success stories for additional scrutiny. For Officer Daniel Reeves, the realization that his actions had triggered a federal civil rights investigation came during a meeting with the department's legal counsel. Based on preliminary review of the evidence, including your body camera footage, text messages, and the discovery of the Community Monitoring Priorities list, we cannot mount an effective defense against these allegations, the attorney informed him, according to later deposition testimony. The department will be seeking a settlement, and you may face individual liability for actions taken outside departmental policy. In that moment, Officer Reeves understood that his career was effectively over. What he couldn't yet grasp was that his personal financial future was also about to be destroyed. The case took another dramatic turn when investigators discovered that the department had been systematically purging complaints filed by minority business owners. A forensic analysis of the department's computer systems revealed that 37 complaints of discriminatory treatment had been deleted from official records over the previous 3 years. This level of systematic evidence suppression transforms this from a case about individual bias to one about institutional corruption, stated Judge Elena Vasquez during a preliminary hearing. The court views these allegations with the utmost seriousness. As we'll see in the next segment, the evidence uncovered during discovery would shock the conscience of the court and lead to one of the largest settlements in Texas history for discriminatory law enforcement practices. The question now facing Officer Reeves wasn't whether he would lose his job, but whether he would face criminal charges for civil rights violations. Have you ever witnessed someone in authority suddenly realize they've made a catastrophic mistake that will follow them forever? What do you think happens when years of unchecked bias suddenly come under the microscope of federal investigators? Share your thoughts as we prepare to reveal how this case transformed from a local incident into a landmark legal decision. The federal courthouse in Austin, Texas was packed to capacity on the morning of October 12, 2023, as U.S. District Judge Elena Vasquez prepared to hear opening arguments in Morgan v. City of Westlake. What had begun as a supposedly routine follow-up on an anonymous tip had evolved into a case that would reshape law enforcement practices across Texas and beyond. Your Honor, this case is about more than one officer's actions or one pharmacist's experience, began Marcel Whitfield, lead attorney for Dr. Morgan. The evidence will show a systematic pattern of using fabricated, anonymous tips as pretext to target successful minority professionals, a pattern known to and condoned by department leadership. The city's defense strategy collapsed just 3 days into the trial when their own expert witness, Dr. Lawrence Keller, a criminologist specializing in law enforcement practices, was forced to concede under cross-examination that the data showed undeniable disparities. Yes, the statistical evidence indicates that minority-owned businesses in Westlake were subjected to anonymous tip investigations at a rate approximately 11 times higher than white-owned businesses with similar profiles, Dr. Keller admitted. I cannot identify any legitimate law enforcement rationale that would explain this disparity. This testimony from the defense's own expert marked a turning point in the proceedings. By the end of that day, sources close to the case reported that the city's attorneys were already discussing settlement options. For Officer Daniel Reeves, the consequences began to cascade with stunning speed. The department's internal affairs investigation, running parallel to the federal case, concluded that he had violated 8 departmental policies, including Officer Reeves engaged in a pattern of selective enforcement without legitimate basis, fabricated anonymous tips as pretext for investigations, conducted unauthorized background checks without reasonable suspicion, accessed restricted areas without proper authorization, and made statements demonstrating bias that brought discredit upon the department, stated the Internal Affairs report, which was entered into evidence in the federal case. On day 5 of the trial, the jury was shown the complete body camera footage from both incidents at Morgan Community Pharmacy, along with footage from Reeves' interactions with white-owned pharmacies in the same district. The contrast was stark and damning. In white-owned establishments, Officer Reeves is observed being cordial, explaining the purpose of his visit, and conducting brief, minimally intrusive interactions, noted Judge Vasquez in her later written opinion. In minority-owned establishments, he is observed being curt, demanding rather than requesting documentation, extending the duration of inspections without apparent cause, and making comments that carry clear undertones of suspicion based solely on the proprietor's race. The most devastating evidence came from Officer Reeves' own text messages with fellow officers, obtained through discovery. In one exchange with Sergeant William Hayes 3 days before his first visit to Morgan Pharmacy, Reeves wrote, "Got another one of those, how did they afford this situations on Oakwood? Pharmacy owned by Morgan. Hey, I'm going to check it out tomorrow. We'll create the usual anonymous tip in the system." Hayes responded, "Good hunting. These success stories always have something behind them. Just make sure the paperwork is clean this time." This exchange, projected on screens throughout the courtroom, visibly shocked several jurors. It provided explicit evidence that the anonymous tip was fabricated as pretext for targeting Dr. Morgan based on race and perceived incongruity between her race and her professional success. By the trial's second week, Officer Reeves' personal attorney advised him to consider a separate settlement to limit his individual liability. According to court transcripts, the attorney informed him. Based on the evidence presented thus far, there is a significant risk that the jury will find your actions were not only discriminatory, but willful and malicious, which would pierce the qualified immunity shield and expose you to personal financial liability. On October 18, 2023, after just 7 days of testimony, the city of Westlake offered to settle the case for $15.9 million, one of the largest settlements for discriminatory law enforcement practices in Texas history. The settlement included specific provisions: $12.7 million in damages to Dr. Morgan and the 4 co-plaintiffs, $3.2 million for attorneys' fees and costs, mandatory department-wide training on bias-free policing, implementation of a new documentation system for all anonymous tips, independent monitoring of enforcement patterns for a period of 5 years, revision of departmental policies regarding business investigations. For Officer Daniel Reeves, however, the consequences continued to mount. The settlement did not include protection for him individually, and the evidence presented during the abbreviated trial had triggered additional investigations. The U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District of Texas has opened an investigation into potential criminal civil rights violations based on evidence that emerged during the Morgan case, reported the Austin American-Statesman on October 20, 2023. The Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, TCOL, also initiated proceedings to revoke Reeves' peace officer license, effectively ending any possibility of his continuing a career in law enforcement anywhere in the state. When an officer fabricates the very basis for citizen contact and demonstrates clear bias in the application of their authority, they violate the fundamental trust placed in them by the public, stated TCOL Director Samuel Ramirez. The evidence in this case shows a pattern of conduct incompatible with the ethical requirements of modern policing. The financial consequences for Reeves were equally severe. While the city's insurance covered the bulk of the settlement, the policy included a willful misconduct exclusion that allowed the insurer to seek reimbursement from individual officers found to have acted outside the scope of their duties. Officer Reeves now faces potential personal liability for a portion of the settlement, estimated at approximately $750,000, reported the Wall Street Journal in a feature on the case. Sources close to Reeves indicate he is considering bankruptcy protection as his legal expenses continue to mount. Beyond the immediate case, the ripple effects spread throughout law enforcement agencies across Texas. The Texas Attorney General's office issued new guidelines for handling anonymous tips, specifically prohibiting the use of these mechanisms for discriminatory purposes. This case has exposed a practice that has no place in modern law enforcement, stated Attorney General Maria Hernandez. Anonymous tips must be documented, verified, and pursued without bias, or the system becomes a tool of oppression rather than protection. For Dr. Alana Morgan, the settlement represented vindication, but also a platform for broader change. Using a portion of the settlement funds, she established the Equal Enforcement Foundation, dedicated to documenting and challenging discriminatory regulatory practices nationwide. This was never just about me or my pharmacy, Dr. Morgan explained in her first post-settlement interview. This was about standing up for every professional who has been made to feel like an intruder in their own success story. No one should have to prove they belong in the position they've earned. The case also prompted a series of internal reviews at police departments across Texas. Within 6 months of the settlement, 17 departments had implemented new documentation requirements for anonymous tips, specifically designed to prevent fabrication and selective enforcement. The Morgan case has become required reading at our academy, noted Captain James Wilson of the Houston Police Department. We use it to demonstrate how implicit bias can manifest in seemingly routine interactions, and how those interactions can have devastating consequences, both for the citizens targeted and for the officers involved. For Officer Daniel Reeves, the final blow came in February 2024, when the U.S. Attorney's Office announced it would not pursue criminal charges, but only in exchange for his agreement to surrender his law enforcement certification permanently and to participate in a documentary series about bias in policing. This resolution ensures that Mr. Reeves will never again hold a position of authority in law enforcement, while also contributing to educational efforts to prevent similar misconduct, stated U.S. Attorney Rebecca Parker. The documentary, titled Anonymous Bias, began filming in March 2024 and features Reeves discussing how departmental culture normalized discriminatory practices and how officers rationalized targeting minority professionals. I never saw myself as racist, Reeves states in the documentary trailer. I told myself I was just being thorough, just following hunches. But when you look at the pattern, who I was thorough with and who I wasn't, it's impossible to deny the bias. And that bias cost me everything. As for Dr. Morgan, her pharmacy continues to thrive, now recognized nationally as a symbol of resistance against discriminatory enforcement. The wall that once displayed her credentials now also features a framed copy of the settlement agreement. A reminder, she says, that justice is possible when you stand your ground and document everything. The security cameras that captured the original incidents remain in place, though they now serve a different purpose. Dr. Morgan has made her experience a teaching tool, occasionally hosting law enforcement training sessions where officers review the footage and discuss how bias can manifest in seemingly routine interactions. The goal isn't to vilify police, she explains. It's to help good officers recognize and interrupt patterns of bias before they lead to the kind of catastrophic consequences we saw in this case. For Officer Daniel Reeves, those consequences continue to unfold. Now unemployed and facing potential bankruptcy, he recently sold his home to cover ongoing legal expenses. According to former colleagues, he has expressed regret not for his actions toward Dr. Morgan, but for getting caught in the changing political climate. This comment, reported in a profile published in Texas Monthly, suggests that despite the severe personal and professional consequences, Reeves may not have fully grasped the fundamental issue at the heart of the case. That equal treatment under the law is not a political position, but a constitutional guarantee. As we prepare for our final segment, consider this question: what does it take to transform individual accountability into systemic change? Dr. Morgan's case forced one department to confront its practices, but how do we ensure that the lessons learned extend beyond a single settlement or a single officer's downfall? 2 years after Officer Daniel Reeves walked into Morgan Community Pharmacy claiming to investigate an anonymous tip, the ripple effects of that fateful encounter continued to transform law enforcement practices across the nation. What began as one officer's bias targeting has catalyzed a fundamental shift in how police interact with minority business owners. On the second anniversary of the settlement, Dr. Alana Morgan stood before a crowd of over 300 people gathered at the Texas State Capitol for the inaugural conference of the Equal Enforcement Foundation. The audience included law enforcement officials, civil rights attorneys, business owners, and legislators from 27 states. The Morgan case established that using anonymous tips as pretext for discriminatory targeting is not just unethical. It's unconstitutional and financially ruinous for the agencies and individuals involved, explained civil rights attorney Marcel Whitfield, who has since become a sought-after speaker on discriminatory enforcement practices. Perhaps the most profound impact of the case has been on minority business owners themselves. Applications for business licenses by minority entrepreneurs in Westlake have increased by 64% since the settlement was announced, suggesting that the public accountability has created a more welcoming environment for diverse business ownership. Before the Morgan case, I was hesitant to open my practice here because I'd heard stories about the extra scrutiny minority professionals faced, stated Dr. James Washington, who recently opened a medical practice in Westlake. Now I know that if anyone questions my right to be here, there are systems in place to ensure fair treatment. The case has also transformed how anonymous tips are handled nationwide. The Department of Justice has issued new guidelines requiring verification of anonymous tips before action is taken, documentation of the specific allegations, and tracking of demographic data to identify potential patterns of discriminatory enforcement. Anonymous tips remain an important tool for law enforcement, stated Attorney General Maria Hernandez, but they cannot be used as a shield for bias or a weapon against specific communities. For Dr. Alana Morgan, this may be the most meaningful outcome of her stand against discrimination, that other professionals can pursue their dreams without the burden of proving they belong. Justice isn't just about punishing wrongdoing, she concluded in her address at the Capitol. It's about creating conditions where wrongdoing becomes less likely. Every time a minority professional opens a business without fear of targeted harassment, every time an officer verifies a tip before acting on it, every time a department reviews its data for signs of bias, that's the real resolution of this case. As Officer Daniel Reeves continues to rebuild his life in the shadow of his mistakes, and as Dr. Morgan continues to build her legacy of advocacy and entrepreneurship, their intertwined story serves as a powerful reminder that justice, while sometimes delayed, can be transformative when it finally arrives. The badge is not a shield against accountability. The law is not a weapon to be wielded selectively. And when authority is abused, the consequences can be as severe as they are lasting. Have you witnessed or experienced discriminatory treatment in your professional life? What systems do you think need to be in place to prevent bias from influencing how law enforcement responds to anonymous tips? Share your thoughts and experiences as we continue the conversation about ensuring equal protection under the law for everyone.